Hey everyone, Mr. Andrew here, and today I'm here to talk to you about one of the most common radiometric dating methods. In this case, we're talking about carbon 14 dating, or commonly known as carbon dating. So here's how this works. So as sunlight enters into our atmosphere, okay, some of that sunlight creates neutrons that have energy. Okay, they're called energetic neutrons. And these energetic neutrons can sometimes bump into a nitrogen 14 molecule, okay, like this. Now, nitrogen 14 is one of the most common nitrogen isotopes, and our atmosphere is like 70% nitrogen. So, this can occasionally happen. Now, nitrogen originally has 7 protons and 7 neutrons, okay? But when this neutron collides with the nucleus, a proton is lost and it is replaced by this neutron. And this is a process called neutron capture. Okay, we're not going to go more into the mechanics of it, but basically a neutron replaces a proton. So as a result of this neutron capture, that nitrogen 14 turns into carbon 14, and carbon 14 has 6 protons and 8 neutrons. Okay, and carbon 14 is radioactive. So carbon 14 enters the atmosphere along with all the other types of carbon. Okay, most carbon is carbon 12. That's the most common isotope. There's some carbon 13, and occasionally you get some carbon 14. Okay, but it's mostly carbon 12. But remember, all isotopes of the same element behave the same way chemically. So as a result, all the carbon in the atmosphere tends to react with oxygen, and a portion of it will form carbon dioxide. Now, this carbon dioxide is absorbed into plants like trees or the grass, and it is turned into food for those plants through photosynthesis. Okay, remember, plants take in oxygen from the atmosphere and turn it into food for themselves. Okay, now that carbon 14, along with all the other carbons, get incorporated into their cells. Okay, because again, all the carbons are behaving the same way chemically. So you've got plants that have a certain portion of their cells as being carbon 14. Now, when animals, like this horse right here, when they eat the plants, that carbon 14 that was inside the plant gets incorporated into their cells. Okay. But because carbon 14 decays, some of those carbon 14s are being turned back into nitrogen 14. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. But because the animal or the plant are still alive and still taking in more and more carbon, this results in the levels of carbon 14 being relatively stable. Okay. However, the game changes when these animals die. Okay. When the animals die, okay, and they become buried, they're no longer eating the grasses or the plants or whatever. Or in the plant's case, they're no longer absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So as a result, once these plants and animals die, their level of carbon 14 stops increasing. Okay. At that point, their carbon 14 level stops increasing, it stays the same. Okay. Now, over time, the carbon 14 that is in their bodies, okay, whether it's in the wood of the trees or in their bones or wherever, that begins to decay to nitrogen 14 by beta decay. So remember, beta decay is when a beta particle, which is basically an electron, is kicked out of the nucleus and it causes one of these protons. Remember, carbon 14 is 6 protons and 8 neutrons. One of these protons, or I'm sorry, one of these neutrons will be converted into a proton. So carbon 14, which has 6 protons and 8 neutrons, will be converted to nitrogen 14, which has 7 protons and 7 neutrons. Okay. But because the level of carbon-14 is never increasing, the ratio between the parent, which is carbon-14, this is the parent isotope, I'll write it down here. The relationship between how much of the parent you have left and how much of the corresponding daughter you have left can be used to identify how old this particular organism was. Okay. Now, carbon-14 has a half-life, T to the 1/2, equal to 5,730 years. So these can be used for basically any animal that's living in like recorded history, okay? The effective use is about 50,000 years back, and that's because after a while, so much of the carbon-14 will be broken down into nitrogen-14 that it'll be really difficult to get a good, accurate measurement as far as how much carbon-14 is left, okay? So hopefully this helps, and I will see you next time.